What's up, Gloomers? Today we're going to be doing a class rundown of the classes of Crimson Scales, a custom project designed by BoardGame613 as well as a few other designers mentioned here. Unlike Gloomhaven, which has a set list of starters and then classes to unlock, Crimson Scales forces you to pick what group you are, which becomes your starting unlocked classes, and then you have to unlock some of the others. That covers just 10 of the classes in this video. There will be 4 classes we'll be going over that are not part of starting class configurations, and I'll talk about them at the end in case you don't want to have spoilers. Remember to like and subscribe for more Crimson Scales and upcoming Frosthaven content. The first class is the Quattro Bombard. The Bombard has a small hand size at 9 and the high health pool starting with 10. The Quattro has a unique mechanic called Projectile, allowing it to place tokens on the board and then trigger effects the following turn when it begins its turn. This requires a little bit of tactical maneuvering because first off, you want to be able to position the projectile late enough that the enemy isn't going to move around during its turn, and then you also want to go early enough that the projectile is sure to land. Unfortunately, the Bombard is actually loaded with a crap ton of late initiatives and a handful of earlies, so you have to be extra careful on how you choose to plan your build out, because picking all the heavy projectile attacks and then taking none of the early ones will almost assuredly result in the character not being able to land these big attacks. Outside of the projectile mechanic, the Bombard also has a variety of retaliate, shield, and other mechanics, allowing it to be a bit tanky, so you don't have to rely entirely on timing your mechanics of projectiles, but instead allowing you to at least have some ranged and melee attacks that don't rely on this. They're a little bit weaker than the projectile attacks, however, it does make it easier to use, so you'll be able to put in some less conditional cards to go along with your heavy hitters. I'd wager a lot of people leaning on projectile builds will have to take barbed armor and rolling into position to ensure that when they do play the projectile cards, they go early enough to ensure they land. The Human Brightspark is an 11 card class with the average health pool. It has a variety of unique effects, including dependency on trackers, but unlike the Drifter, who has the ability to move them around, the Brightspark has a lot of these trackers with weaker effects, but with cool things that might change. So you can, instead of seeing just like, does it have experience or does it not have experience, it might have your next attack inflicts wound or poison, or your next turn start infusing elements, as we see here in weather forecast and critical observation. The Brightspark benefits from having a variety of not only support mechanics, being able to debuff enemies and also heal, but it also has a variety of ranged and melee attacks. So you can customize your Brightspark to what your party needs. Although it isn't necessarily a tank, it can do almost anything else outside of that. The Inox Chainguard has a hand size of 10 and the high health pool. This is a very tanky class, and I like the take on it. It has a new mechanic, Shackle, which is a weaker form of Immobilize that has some upsides. It prevents the enemy from making movements whilst it's adjacent to you. The critical difference is it determines focus before doing movement. So if you're able to maneuver enemies around to possibly make yourself not the focus, you could potentially stop an enemy in their tracks, preventing their attacks from landing. It's hard to do this, but there's a few mechanics that allow you to screw with focus. The Chainguard has a lot of abilities that interact with shackled targets, such as being able to cause direct damage to them, push and pull them. So whatever you end up shackling ends up, you have some bonus interactions with them. With a variety of melee attacks, heal, self-heals, shield, and retaliate, it's also very well positioned to be a good tank for your party. The Chieftain has a hand size of 10 and the medium health pool. It has a variety of summons, which are losses that allow it to create summons on the board and interact with them. It has the ability to get lost cards back, so even if you do play quite a few of them, you can get them back, so don't be fooled by the 10 hand size and the large amount of losses. The mount mechanic allows it to leap atop some of its summons, allowing the summon to move the Chieftain with them. Then the Chieftain can perform its attacks after getting free movement from the summon. Fantastic. Given the variety of summons the Chieftain has, as you can see here, you can pick whatever playstyle your party needs. Whether you need more bodies just to take some hits or more damage output, you've got a lot of options. The Fire Knight has a hand size of 10 and a medium-high health pool starting at 9, which is a new health tracker that's part of Crimson Scales. The Fire Knight has a ladder mechanic, allowing it to drop an overlay tile called its ladder. It can move onto this tile, ignoring anything of what's underneath it. Other people treat the latter as difficult terrain, which can screw with enemy monster behavior. Additionally, there are interactions you can have with your target while on it, adjacent, and so on and so forth. The Fire Knight has a variety of interactions, including with the element fire, but also the ability to play more of a support role, more of a damage role, or more of a tank role. You have a lot of options depending on how you want to build it, but you can always perform a bit of a hybrid role, which is what I usually end up preferring when I'm building a Fire Knight. I'm especially fond of playing with fire. I like the mechanic of an attack 5 loss on bottom, which is pretty good for a loss action at level 1. Especially for a bottom attack, which is what most people need. But if you're on your ladder, it's actually a ranged attack. So this allows you to have either a melee or a ranged attack depending on your positioning. That kind of versatility is what I like in classes. The human Heirophant has a low health pool but 11 hand size. The Heirophant has one cool mechanic called prayer. Anytime a prayer ability is triggered, you're allowed to put a prayer from your supply, which is kept separate and not chosen as part of your 11 cards that you choose at the start of the scenario, and you give one of your allies one of these prayer cards. They can't use this to mitigate damage as part of a loss, but they can play it as part of their 2 cards, and some of them have some really neat effects. What I really like is some of the cards have conditional ways to get prayers. For example, Harsh Rebuke requires you to perform an attack, and you only perform the prayer action on an ally if that attack is able to kill an enemy. There's a lot of these other conditional effects, and a lot of more interactions that require that if the target has an ally adjacent, so on and so forth, requiring you to focus more specifically on where are my allies and can I attack things adjacent to my allies, and can I perform attacks so I can give prayers to my allies, making it an incredibly good support class. Not only that, but relying on light and earth elements as well as handling all of this, you have a little bit of complexity to juggle. However, most of the mechanics outside of this are incredibly simple and don't require a lot of thinking. I do really enjoy this class because I think that Gloomhaven could really use some strong supports that don't just have heal 3, range 3, boring stuff like that, but actual player interaction, which is what this offers. The Sada's Hollowpact has a strange health progression starting at 7, making it just slightly more than the low health progression with a hand size of 10. It has 2 interesting mechanics. Void Energy, allowing it to store up void energy to perform for attacks. The cool part about this is you want to save these up and use them, but you can't hold on to them too long, because if you start holding up energy, you can start wounding or muddling yourself, making your actions a lot less powerful and either just hurting yourself. So you'll want to consume them. Additionally, you have the Void Sight mechanic, allowing you to look at your modifier deck and shuffle them, and or at least have an insight into what's coming forward. So being able to use Void Sight before setting up big attacks allows you to more readily ensure that an attack is going to land, or maybe even change your mind to a different attack knowing what's coming. Despite its low health pool, it does have quite a few melee attacks, so you have to play very carefully. Luckily, it has crowd control, some ranged attacks, and some mobility, as we can see from the cards here. Ultimately, I do think the Hollowpact is a little bit more complex. I would encourage players that don't like complex classes to maybe deviate to some of the other classes, as this one might require a little bit more thinking. However, I do think that this is a super great class, and I enjoy playing it. The Lurker Luminary has an 11 hand size and a high health pool. It has a variety of cards that allow it to perform glow actions. Glow actions are a special mechanic the Luminary has, allowing it to spend elements during its turn to perform area of effect abilities. Now, these can be a variety of things between healing, strengthening allies, or wounding or mobilizing enemies in the area. And as you level up, you get stronger glow effects, but you can only have one glow effect at a time. The cool part is, glow effects don't take up top or bottom actions. So once a glow effect's in play, you can consume an element during your turn to just perform the effect and then continue with your actions, which is wonderful. Additionally, the Luminary has a mechanic called Scuttle. Some of its actions require the enemies to be in specific positions, and then the crab scuttles around, often getting a bonus. The Scuttle allows it to have some mobility, while also generating elements most of the time. The Luminary reminds me of other classes that rely on elements. However, because you have several ways of generating elements creatively, especially all of its losses, which, depending on where enemies are positioned, you might be able to generate different elements. You'll be able to more creatively figure out, how do I generate the elements I need to be more effective? And because you always have one glow up that can use one element, you might learn to lean on one element instead of just trying to use them all. And ultimately, I think some of the other classes design fell short. I think this one's notably more interesting. Also making it a more element-reliant melee character makes it very interesting to me. The Quattro Mirefoot has a couple mechanics. It has a hand size of 10 and the low health pool. So the Quattro Mirefoot has this cool ability to have not just poison and wound, but special poisons and wounds, like wound 2 or poison 2. They're just like wound or poison. However, like wound 2 says at the start of turn, the target suffers 2 damage instead of 1. And poison 2 says the target, all attacks targeting them get +2. Now, the Mirefoot has a variety of mechanics that interact with that. For example, poisoning the target if they're already wounded, or some mechanics that just require you to do weak melee attacks but put a big debuff on them. The Mirefoot has the ability to create difficult terrain, and not only that, but interact with it, including creating summons within difficult terrain or moving through it without penalty. I ultimately think that the Mirefoot's terrain interaction and being able to debuff enemies make it a very, very good team player because you have a lot of options. I do wonder how it would work out in a 2-player count, because I do think that Poison 2 is immensely useful in a 4-player scenario and falls off as you get lower player counts. However, I do think that no matter what, you have options at any player count with this character. The Starslinger. The Esper Starslinger has a low health pool and a 10 hand size. It has a couple mechanics, so let's go over the easier one. There are several mechanics that interact with it being at full health, so a Starslinger may want to find ways to stay at full health to provide options with these cards, so you have these boosted effects. Additionally, there are area attacks, which are pretty normal for a class. However, there are ones with red and then yellow indicators, where if you perform an attack targeting an enemy in the red hex, you give a conditional bonus to the ally in the yellow hex. It's very important though, because you can't just give the bonus to an ally in the yellow hex. You must perform the attack as part of it to give the bonus. The Starslinger has a variety of attacks that will target enemy exactly 1 hex away and then target some ally or allies in the interim. So you have some like moderate to low range, lots of healing, and so it kind of plays as a close mid-range attacker with some support. It does have some melee attacks, however. I do love the flavor of Solar Eclipse, making an ally on the other side of enemies turn invisible. That's a cool effect to the idea of screwing with light and creating an eclipse using that ally, making them invisible for a round. With light and dark element interactions, the ability to require enemies and allies to be in specific positions, a low health pool, as long as with some melee attacks in short range, it might be a little complicated for newer players. However, I do enjoy it, and I think the fact that this one has very interesting support along with the ability to punch out a significant amount of damage makes it a very good class. So first, we're going to talk about the unlockable class that starts in Crimson Scales, and then 3 that's part of an expanded package. The Vermling Spirit Caller has a hand size of 10 and a low health pool. The Spirit Caller has a spirit mechanic. Spirits are effectively summons, but they don't count as figures on the battlefield. They can't be targeted or focused. Every time a spirit ends its turn, it suffers 1 damage, giving it a limited lifespan of what it does while it persists on this world. Spirits luckily don't interact with any tiles, so they can go through hexes and whatnot. They have various different effects depending on what your party needs. The Burning Pit allows you to create a spirit that will blow up for 3 true damage once it connects with an enemy. And the bottom half allows you to move and then also interact with people that are occupying the same hexes as spirits. So with the amount of spirits you can summon, depending on if you want an enemy in or adjacent to your spirits, take a look at Confidence Ritual, which gives you a large attack depending if you have a large number of spirits next to it. And you probably won't have a large number of spirits because a lot of them are tops and require you to, they last a limited number of turns. So you might not have a huge amount of them when you do this. However, it is an attack 3 plus the number of spirits, so it's not awful. Take a look at the Horde of Bones. This allows you to actually create cool summons that this normally might be considered overpowered in Gloomhaven, which normally people see like, oh, it's a multi-target ranged attacker. Ranged attackers are incredibly strong in Gloomhaven. However, given its health pool of 2 and it will die in 2 rounds, regardless of how well you protect it, this allows you to kind of ability to use summons in a way where you don't necessarily need to worry about the fact that monster behavior sometimes puts them in suicidal positions. So I like this mechanic. Not only that, but the fact that it interacts with all of these. It has elemental interactions. This is just a fun class to play. The Amber Aegis has a high health pool starting at 12, which is unheard of. The Amber Aegis has the highest health pool in the game, and it has these mechanics that revolve around colonies. colonies are tiles that can just toss out on the map. It doesn't screw with enemy focus or anything. However, as the enemies step on them, they get destroyed, and the Aegis suffers 1 damage. However, you can try to protect you. You've got a big health pool, you can stand in front of them. Many of the actions that create colonies also cultivate. When cards that create colonies don't remove them when you drop them. So you could let them discard and replay them and create colonies over and over, which is great. However, as long as that card's discarded, the cultivate action doesn't work. So like taking a look at Seek Nourishment, as long as you have the wonderful colony of bees next to an ally, and whenever they start their turn, they perform a heal 1 action. Great. However, this is a cultivate. So as soon as you scoop this up, those bee colonies that are on the board are no longer performing the heal 1 action at the start of turns. So you'll want to put this back in to make sure your colonies are active and doing things that are on the board. Note, although there is a max limit to the number of colonies you can place, once you place a colony that violates the limit of number of colonies, you remove, not destroy, so you don't lose the health from creating new colonies beyond your limit. The Quattral Artificer has the semi-low health pool starting at 7 and has a hand size of 9. The Artificer's main mechanic is scrap. That's conditional ways of getting scrap. Like if perform a loot, and if you loot 2 or more, get a scrap. Or like perform this attack. If you consume an item as part of this attack, get this bonus and blah. So there's a lot of ways to get scrap, including like certain attacks that'll give you cool stuff. So that's nice. The Artificer gets the bonus of being able to use the scrap to create special attacks, souped up attacks, bonuses, or what I like, summons. And summons, I have a timer. So every time this summon activates, it'll have certain effects that trigger, sometimes giving you experience, sometimes returning a scrap to you. A lot of them seem to like cost 2 and then give you 1 scrap back as they disassemble themselves and fall apart on the final turn. Other than that, the Artificer has a variety of ranged attacks, area of effect, healing, and support. Between that, the summons, you'll be wanting to stay back a little bit, but because you do have some cards that actually do hit hard, don't afraid to get close and just blow up enemies. The Vermling Ruin Maw has a hand size of 11 and the medium health track. So the Vermling Ruin Maw has a very cool mechanic called Sated. Spending loss effects, which are indicated on the cards of the Vermling Ruin Maw, give it this buff. The buff will give you many mandatory buffs that make all your cards a lot better. So the cool part is a lot of the cards have interesting effects that are decently strong enough, and then while you have this buff, have increased effects such as just more actions. Sometimes it's, hey, I get an attack 2, but before I do my attack 2, I move 2, which is great. Or I get to target this guy with an attack, and then whilst having this buff, you target 2 enemies with it, which is huge. So you'll want to figure out how to time your losses to have good effects, and then also play your non-loss cards that give you bonuses after that. So you have to get a little creative, but it's an insanely good melee character. Now, it's very easy to play it lackluster because a lot of its actions are a little behind the curve. So if you don't time it well, you'll often be playing like a weaker scoundrel. However, if you can time your losses creatively and get all the actions in, you will more often be able to push more effort than the standard melee attacker. Now, it does require that little asterisk, so you have to be able to do that. But being able to look ahead, say, hey, I have these losses, I have these bonuses, and being able to stack as many as you can within that period of huge burst damage or burst mobility or burst anything, because they kind of range between what the effects are, usually more damage or more targets. You can have it pay off immensely. This is one class I'm looking forward to. Just seeing more of. I personally still have yet to play it, so I really love to jump into this because I do love melee attackers with a little bit of nuance to them. And that's it. So I ultimately think that this gives a lot of really fun and interesting classes to Gloomhaven, which could use some, because I think Frosthaven, first off, solves a lot of that because some of the Frosthaven classes are super fun, but we don't have it yet. And this gives us, first off, a whole new campaign of so many more scenarios. And not only have 11 new classes that are all so interesting. We are going to be streaming Crimson Scales on Thursdays, so be sure to check out the streams there, hop in and see some of your classes played. We've already started a few of the scenarios in, so we'll be starting at scenario 4 when we resume. I'd like to thank Board Game 613 as well as all the guest designers who contributed classes and scenarios to Crimson Scales. So thank all of you. You guys are all wonderful. I'd like to thank all my patrons. Thank you for supporting the channel. You guys are fantastic. Consider joining Patreon in the link below if you want to be able to vote on which classes I fix and which guides I make, as well as have a little bit of early access to certain videos. I'm super hyped for Crimson Scales, and I hope you are too. Thanks for watching.